Welcome to another episode of the Superflexology Starts It series, a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Network. After a short hiatus, we are finally back with the final episode of the 2019 season, gearing up for Week 16. I'm your host, John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club. I'm joined by Mitch Sorensen, and that's at DinoMC on Twitter. And Mitch, I'm assuming that you're feeling pretty good with your lead going into Week 16 here.
I am. It's over. I don't even know why we're doing this because the only thing that matters is that I won.
Well, Jordan could catch you, and the three of us are battling, Jordan, Dan, and myself, we're battling for last place. So it's all bragging rights at this point.
That does matter. I mean, as long as you're not last is kind of the most important thing.
Wait, hold on. You say we're battling for last place, but I got a 2-point lead on second right now. After just wallowing in third and fourth all year, I have a pretty decent lead on second, so I don't want to hear that from you, sir.
That could change very quickly, though. Week 16, this is the big one, guys. So you already heard him. That's Jordan Lindsay at Jailbreak Screen on Twitter. What's going on, Jordan?
Hey, man, since all my teams got eliminated in Week 14, I got a good chance to dive into the 2020 stuff, the draft stuff early, and we're taking that heat map I had last year, and I'm making it a lot better. We're throwing in UFAs, RFAs, potential cap hits or cap casualties, and it's coming along nicely. We got formulas involved. We got potential cap space. Things going to be nice. I got one division down, 7 to go, but I put out a terrible product the first time, and this thing is going to be sweet. I'm telling you, just be ready for it.
I like that a lot, and we're probably going to be stealing it whenever we do our free agent dynasty episode here in a few weeks, and then, the possibility of the changing landscape, especially with the rookies coming in. But I enjoyed what you did last year, and I'm excited to see the product, especially if it's going to be better than last year.
I was going to blow it away. Don't worry.
All right, so I'm going to hold you to that. And then finally, we are joined by the legend himself, Dan Lamagna, and that's at LC_Dean on Twitter. What's going on, Dan?
I always appreciate the intro, John. I'm looking at Jordan's fancy heat map here, man. That's popping off the screen. It's our favorite Week 16. I'm ready to go get it. And my Dallas Cowboys even have hope again. Let's go.
Well, Dan, I'm expecting big things from you this week. Since you said that you have the next few weeks off of work, I'm expecting a lot of time into your picks tonight.
The fun has begun. The studying, I cranked it up today with a shortened work day. Ready to get it here, man. I can't finish last in this contest.
We'll see about that. But again, I said we had a short hiatus. I accept the blame there. It's been a crazy month for me, so I do apologize to everybody. But we are back at it. The last week of the season, Week 16 is here. Last week of what should be your fantasy season. Hopefully nobody out there is playing a Week 17 championship. But before we dive into Week 16, looking at the scoring through Week 15 in our season-long contest, Mitch is at 40 points, Jordan 37, finally out of the basement. I'm at 35, and Dan, man, you've had a couple rough weeks. You were at 34 points. But again, we're battling for last place. Unless Mitch royally screws things up, he has first locked. But Jordan has been coming on strong. So we're going to see how Week 16 plays out. Let's dive right into it. Let's look at the starts versus the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings for Week 16. Dan, let's start with you. Who do you have?
All right, JB, you mentioned, I hit a little funk there. I started the season hot. I think there's some correlation with my Dallas Cowboys midseason swoon. So I'm going to finish the Superflexology season here on brand for myself, and I'm going with Amari Cooper as the start of the week. He owns the Eagles secondary, guys. He's ranked 10th in the Fantasy Pros rankings. I'm predicting a top 5 finish this week. The Cowboys are a road favorite in a must-win game where they're going to lock up the division title. The team is hot. They played a great game versus the Rams, and I say Amari Cooper is going to deliver for our listeners' Week 16 championship games. And just remember last week, Dwayne Haskins looked good against the Birds. So Amari Cooper this week, he delivers.
Yeah, that's true. I understand what you're saying, but and Mitch knows this better than anybody. During the whole offseason, from more of a dynasty perspective, but redraft as well, I was really high on Amari Cooper, and he's had some fantastic, huge games in 2019, but he's disappeared as of late. But you think he's going to come out of that funk here in Week 16?
Yeah, I think part of that disappearing has been a combination of he's been playing some really lockdown corners, and he hasn't been 100%. The Cowboys themselves, their offense has kind of been up and down week to week, but it's starting to click. I've been watching every single rep of his. He looked pretty healthy lately. I don't see him gimping around or coming off the field as much. And I just think when, everything's on the line, he rises and finishes the season strong.
Well, I hope so for your sake, because I know that you have at least a few championship games here in Week 16, and I would bet money that you have Amari Cooper on those lineups. So hopefully he pans out for you here in Week 16. Mitch, who do you have? Who's your start versus the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings?
So I have Mostert. He is running back 22 in the consensus rankings. And we always kind of try to look for that San Francisco running back that's getting the most touches. And right now it's Raheem. He's averaging about 15 touches in the last couple of games, but he's had a touchdown in the last 4 games. And with the 49ers being 6.5 point favorites and a 51 point over under there, I just think it's a pretty easy start. I think he's more of a mid RB2 instead of the late RB2 that he's ranked.
And we saw what Zeke just did to that Rams defense last week. And I'm not saying Raheem Mostert is Ezekiel Elliott by any means, but the way that the 49ers have committed to the run this season, I could see Mostert beating out the running back 22 ranking. Do you think there's any possibility that somebody else gets thrown into the mix here? I think I saw, 6 different running backs have led the 49ers this year in fantasy points in a different game. So, I would like to think they stick with him, but who's to say that, Tevin Coleman doesn't come back and pop off a game?
I think the only difference is they finally realized that Tevin Coleman sucks. We watched it last year in Atlanta. He couldn't do anything. They've tried to give him a lot of run this year. And then every single time they've give Mostert chances, he's produced. And so I think they're just going to keep feeding him the ball.
Not that yards per carry is the end-all be-all here. He's at almost 6 yards per carry in his career or something crazy like that. So he has been productive when given the opportunity. So I like that one there. Mostert for the 49ers, running back 22. Jordan, over to you. Who do you have?
So I got to stay on brand. I would be disappointed if I didn't. At RB 25, it's going to be David Montgomery against the Chiefs. He gets 15 to 20 touches a game, and against the Chiefs defense, that's going to produce at least 1 touchdown, if not at least 100 yards as well. So, yeah, their run defense is terrible. They've been getting crushed all year on the ground. So, plus the Bears have been looking better lately. Mitch has been somewhat competent, so I'm going to stick with my guy David. And for the last week of the season, we just got to ride with it.
I know that he has the prime matchup here, but we've seen Montgomery flounder earlier in the season. And the one game specifically I'm thinking of, it's the Lions game where he was a smash play. Everybody had him in DFS, and he just was such a disappointment. But running back 25, I think there is a possibility. It really doesn't take much to get to that number. So, hey, we'll see. Maybe he pops off here in week 16. So, Jordan, while you're staying on brand with David Montgomery, Dan is definitely on brand with Amari Cooper. I'm going to pick somebody that I've been against throughout the season. And again, Mitch, you heard me talk about him during the offseason. It's Mike Williams. He's ranked as wide receiver 27 on Fantasy Pros against the Raiders. He's a favorable matchup. He's going against Nevin Lawson. Lawson hasn't played many games, but he's allowing a completion percentage over 73%. 73%. That's an outrageous number. Rivers, he's been taking shots down the field, at least 6 targets in 3 of his last 4 games for Mike Williams. I think they continue to stretch the field. Rivers is ranked in the top 8 in terms of intended air yards. And Mike Williams, he's over 20 yards per reception, which leads the NFL. It really could only take 3 or 4 receptions for him to beat that wide receiver 27 ranking. So again, while you guys are staying on brand, I'm going against my brand, and I'm taking Mike Williams here in week 16. Do you guys have any thoughts there on him?
I'm happy you said that, JB, because he's definitely high on my radar this week. So high, Mitch wouldn't even trade me him in a dynasty league today as much as I tried. So I like when, I'm studying GPP and your guys' start of the weeks are someone I'm looking at. So that's very encouraging. So, and I'm going to talk about him maybe a little bit more later. And I'll just touch on Jordan and Mitch, your picks there. Mostert, Mitch, I think you're onto something with him. Last week I tried to pivot off him with Matt Breida, and that didn't quite pay off. He fumbled and only had 4 carries. So I think he's definitely the man in San Francisco. And Jordan, I appreciate you joining me and staying on brand to finish the last show.
Also, Mostert was my sit of the week last week, so let's just talk about that for a second.
Well, we'll keep flipping and flopping here. Sit last week, so start this week. All right, guys, so week 16, that wraps up the starts. Let's transition over to the sits. Dan, let's start with you. Against Fantasy Pros consensus rankings, who are you sitting?
This sit's a little painful because I'm kind of relying on this guy in a dynasty league, my orphan to championship team. But my sit of the week is ranked at 11th right now in Fantasy Pros, and that's A.J. Brown. Mega talent, guys, but he still plays for the Titans. and he gets the Marshawn Lattimore treatment this week. Lattimore gives up 24.8 yards a game to receiver. He did that last weekend to T.Y. Hilton, who only got 4 for 25. I just don't see it. A.J. Brown, easy sit of the week.
I like that pick there, and I actually think this Titans team could struggle a little bit. So for season-long dynasty redraft, you look at people that have been on Ryan Tannehill, especially in Superflex or 2 quarterback leagues, and that whole offense, I think it's going to be a little bit rough here in week 16, and I'm going to hit on them a little bit later as well. So I can appreciate A.J. Brown being a sit at wide receiver 11. Jordan, what are you thinking here? Who's your sit?
Yeah, so at wide receiver 12, Julian Edelman going against the Bills. That game's going to probably be an over-under max of 30 points, I would say. And quite frankly, he's been not producing. He looks beat up. Brady looks beat up. The whole offense looks bad. And the Bills have a superb defense, as we all found out Sunday night, those of us that don't really follow the Bills. But, I don't really trust anything in the Patriots offense right now. And at wide receiver 12, Edelman's an easy sit.
All right, well, I'm going to skip Mitch here. Well, I'm going to push you to the back burner for a moment because I'm going to jump in here. I also have Julian Edelman at wide receiver 12. And you look at the game they played earlier in the season against the Bills, 4 catches, 30 yards, and that's when he was still, somewhat healthy. This last week, he didn't look explosive. He was struggling out there in the field. And yeah, they had a lead. So maybe that was one of the reasons that he had a limited snap share for week 15. But I don't like what I saw. If I have him on my roster and I'm playing for a championship, I would be very hesitant to start him. So Jordan, I'm right there with you. I'm fading him at wide receiver 12. I honestly would be very shocked this week coming off of an injury. I think it's the knee and the shoulder, and against a tough Bills defense in a game that the Bills have to have, I can't see him even being wide receiver 24. So I'm right there with you. Mitch, who do you have here? Who's your sit?
Well, good thing you jumped in because I have the exact same take, John. I have Edelman as well. But
let's go, man.
I mean, I just don't play wide receivers against Buffalo. Tre'Davious White is awesome, and they're definitely going to put him on Edelman because they're going to have to rely on Sanu getting 80 yards, and I just don't even see that happening. So yeah, I'm definitely going to sit Edelman. But one thing I wanted to bring up with AJ Brown there is he might be one of the wide receivers that we just don't care about who his matchup is. It's going to take another few weeks to actually see that, maybe half of next year as well. But there's some wide receivers that we just don't care who the cornerback is going against him. And I think A.J. Brown might be one of those guys.
Oh, my God. Mitch, you're hinting at A.J. Brown being matchup proof, and that's got me hot and bothered.
Calm down over there, Jordan. Calm down over there. Well, it's funny because when we did our show and we talked about the incoming rookies, and this was prior to the NFL draft this year, Mitch, you and I both said that we thought A.J. Brown was one of those guys that was not landing spot dependent. And then when he went to Tennessee, I'm ashamed to even admit it, I dropped him down my rookie draft board because of the situation. Same. And we look at these situations and how quickly can they change? It only took benching Marcus Mariota for the great Ryan Tannehill to unleash A.J. Brown's potential. And now we're talking about him as a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty now. Not even just for 1 week. We're talking about Dynasty overall, too.
And his rookie season.
Exactly. And you look at his metrics and you talk about yards per target and this and that. And it's a historic season. But, as I go on my short little tirade here, situations change so much. And Mitch, this is something that you and I will get into a little bit later when we do our Dynasty show next week. But yeah, A.J. Brown, I think he is going to be in the conversation where we don't care about the matchup. Hopefully Ryan Tannehill continues to produce the way he does or has. But I do think that Saints defense, after that 49ers game 2 weeks ago and what we saw at the improvements against the Colts, I think it's going to be a tough matchup for the Titans, though, as I kind of go on that long spiel there that everybody probably forgot what we were talking about. But
all I know is you guys are trying to gang on me here with 3 Julian Edelmans to my 1 A.J. Brown. I have never been a bigger Edelman fan than I am this weekend.
I would be very shocked. I don't know what the over-under is on the Tom Brady passing yards, but I would be very surprised to see him break 200. So I might have to check out that line and see what it's at. So we have 3 Julian Edelmans as our sit. And one A.J. Brown. So we'll see how it plays out. But hopefully, Dan, that's the one that gives me the edge to keep you in the basement, and we'll figure out what your punishment's going to be as a result. All right, so again, we have our starts, we have our sits, final takes of the season here. Over to the DraftKings picks. Mitch, who's your over $6,000 fade?
It's going to be Kenyon Drake. I understand they priced him up because he had that huge 4-touchdown game, but he's only paid off he's only 6,200, and he's only paid off that price tag twice. And that includes the game last week. Now he's an underdog on the road in Seattle. And at 6,200, there's just no reason to play him this week.
The only thing, Seattle has not been great against running backs as of late. And I think it might be incorrect, but I thought I saw they've given up 5 touchdowns to running backs over the last 3 weeks. So who knows? Maybe Kenyon Drake, he continues with that magical run from last week. And I didn't get to see some of the games on Sunday, and this was one of them. And it was crazy checking the stats updates and touchdown after touchdown. What was it, 4 this week?
Yeah, he got 4.
Yeah, so we'll see if he continues that, and maybe he'll smash that 6,200. But Mitch, you have him as a fade. All right, over to you, Dan. Who do you have? Who is your over $6,000 fade this week?
All right, over 6K fade. I think George Costanza in an episode of Seinfeld got in trouble for double dipping once before, but I am double dipping, especially that Mitch said this guy is matchup proof. A.J. Brown at $7,000, guys, not having it. When I look at this list and I see my boy Amari at 6,700, Red Hot Devontae Parker at 6,800, T.Y. Hilton at 6,400, all three of those guys in sweet matchups, and somehow the recency bias on A.J. Brown at 7K. Love the guy, definitely talented, but not in this matchup versus Mr. Lattimore. So, guys, over 6K sit of the week, A.J. Brown, and I can't wait to bust Mitch's chops after the game.
So I haven't seen any of the projected ownership shares, and maybe you have, Dan, because I know that you look at that a lot, but I would not be surprised to see A.J. Brown in a good amount of lineups in GPPs this week. As you mentioned it, recency bias, and whether it's redraft, daily, dynasty, we all, to an extent, suffer from recency bias. And I do think that A.J. Brown's going to be somewhat heavily owned, and this could be a good pivot, away from him this week.
I think you're onto something there, John. I am looking at some Pro Football Focus early ownership projections, and Brown's definitely up there higher for the wide receivers. I'd say he's definitely in the top 25 of overall players for the week. So let everyone else take him, man. I'm off A.J. Brown.
All right. So, yeah, double dipping there. And hopefully nobody saw you dip twice there. I love Seinfeld, so I love the reference. Fantastic. All right, Jordan, over to you. DraftKings over $6,000 fade.
So, I remember back in the Week 5 podcast, I talked to John after he faded Nick Chubb against the Ravens. I was like, when are we just going to say Nick Chubb is matchup proof?
Wait, I don't think you talked to me about it. I think you yelled at me, and my feelings were a little hurt, but okay.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I remember that.
What?
That happened.
But guess what? My fade this week at 6,900 was Nick Chubb against the Ravens. And the reason being, he may run for 100 yards, but he probably won't find the end zone, and he probably won't have any catches because Kareem Hunt's completely ruined him. So we, back in Week 5, we were talking about how Nick Chubb was great. He can just, he's completely matchup proof. But against the Ravens, against the defense and an offense like that, it's just the way Kareem Hunt's kind of torpedoed his PPR value. I'm just going to sit him at 6,900. There's no way.
And it's funny because this is the exact game against the Ravens in round 1 this season that I also faded him, and he popped off like 200 yards and I think it was a few touchdowns, and I think it was RB1. So hopefully he doesn't have the same fate this week for you, Jordan. I'm sticking with running back, though, and I'm going to the same game that Dan went with. Derrick Henry, 7,700, a little bit of a hamstring issue, and we saw it last week. While he still had a ton of carries, he wasn't as effective. And I think it's going to be a negative game script for the Titans. I do think this is a tough matchup against the Saints. Since that game against the 49ers, it was only 2 weeks ago, but it looks like that defense is re-energized. They caused fits for the Colts last week. You look at statistics, you look at some numbers. The Saints defense, they're number 7 in terms of adjusted line yards, 3rd when it comes to second level yards. So they're not giving up big plays to running backs. They rank 9th with only 10 rushing touchdowns against this season through 14 games. If I'm looking to spend up at running back, I'm not looking Derrick Henry's way. He's a strong fade for me, especially at $7,700. Now, if they get some goal line work and he's able to punch it in, he might be able to return on that. But just what we saw, 3 weeks ago, I think it was 3 weeks ago, he had 6 receptions for 150 yards. And I think he from last week and still not fully 100%. He practiced as of Wednesday, but he sat before that. Like I said, he's a strong fade for me. Any thoughts there on Derrick Henry, guys?
I just worry about him being injured. I just don't know if he's going to be healthy enough to get, his total allotment of snaps.
And especially if they fall behind, not to say that Derrick Henry can't catch the ball because he has shown that skill set, but it's going to be tough to see him get the carries necessary to return on that price tag. Now, again, he pops off an 80-yard touchdown, boom, he's in business. But it's going to be tough against that Saints defense, who's been pretty good against the run for the most part.
Yeah, I'm worried he's hitting a little bit of a wall there. I'm still stinging a little bit. He cost me in our 16-team Dynasty League last week with his whopping, I think, 8-point performance. So you're onto something there with Henry. Chubb's an interesting one, too. I'm looking at his stats here on DraftKings, and 7.5 yards per carry last week for Nick Chubb, and they only give the guy the ball 17 times. He had 127 yards. He could have just kept going, and then they lose the game. I don't know why they put the ball in Baker's hands. Week before versus the Bengals, 7.1 yards a carry. They only give the guy the ball 15 times. Someone fire Freddie Kitchens for me, please.
I think anybody that has anybody in that offense for fantasy purposes, they share that sentiment. Like it's been very frustrating to watch. And I'm here in Pittsburgh, so I'm not exactly the biggest Browns fan, but from a fantasy perspective, those weapons need to be unleashed, and it's just not happening right now. So yeah, hopefully something changes here heading into next year. Maybe from a play calling perspective, I think he's still calling the plays, and I don't know why. All right, so Kenyon Drake, 6,200, Nick Chubb, 6,900, AJ Brown, Dan the Double Dipper at 7,000, and I'm throwing Derrick Henry at 7,700. Those are our fades of the week. Now let's transition over to plays. Under $6,000, Jordan, who do you like?
It's going to be D.D. Westbrook against the Falcons. He's kind of been quiet lately. I was the biggest chart guy all season, but obviously DJ's, he's probably done. If you haven't dropped DJ yet, go ahead and do it in the draft, of course. But yeah, no, Dede, I think he's going to tear up the Falcons. Honestly, I think the Jaguars are going to play super energized. I think they're going to come out and throw all over the Falcons with Tom Coughlin being fired. Let us all just say our graces for that. Like, thank the good Lord that Tom Coughlin's been fired, because now the Jaguars can be good again. So yeah, I love Dede. He's at 5,100 this week. He's going to be the number one receiver. I think he's going to get a ton of yak. He's going to find the end zone at least once against that hit or miss Falcons defense. I think it's going to be an energized, like I said, Jaguars team. So give me Dede at 5,100.
You guys know how I've kind of given Gardner Minshew a hard time this season, but he's a guy that I actually like this week. And as a result, I also do like D.D. Westbrook. He's just been so tough to gauge what he's going to do from a week-to-week basis. And he's either going to go off or he's going to turn in with 6 points. So it's tough to see anywhere in between there for D.D. But again, I like Minshew this week a lot, and I like Westbrook too. Dan, over to you. Who do you have under $6,000?
There's one last comment on the Dede thing there, man. I don't know if I'm brave enough to play that roulette wheel. Just been stung too many times this year by the Jaguars. And although it is time for change with Tom Coughlin, I think the problems in Jacksonville are a lot deeper than that as a very dysfunctional team. Maybe like a little Lenny Fournette this week and Shark comes back, but I don't know. So we'll see what happens there, Jordan. But my under six play, guys, hey, I've got like the golden stamp here from JB with his start of the week, if that gives you a little hint. And this was a tough one because there are some nice plays under there, man. I'm looking at Lindsey at 5,300, James Washington 5,300, the Gazelle Tyrell Williams in a revenge game 4,900, John Ross 42, Melvin Gordon 56, just to give the listeners a little last Super Flexology episode, guys to look at. But the under six play is the JB start of the week, Mike Williams at 5,000. 2 straight games with a touchdown. He had 9 targets versus the Vikings, put in a 4 for 71 line with a touchdown. His last 3 games, he's got 19, 14, and 17 DK points. I think Phillip Rivers is limited, and his best throw is just a deep ball to Mike Williams. And I think the Raiders are going to give up. They lost to the sorry Jags last week. I think they quit versus the Chargers and get smoked by Mike Will.
Yeah, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. Rivers, he's going for broke at this point. I mean, he hasn't been extended yet. He's a free agent after this season, and I think he just thinks, what do I have to lose? He's been going downfield often. I talked about the intended air yards, and we talked about the Mike Williams yards per reception, over 20 yards. So yeah, obviously I have as my start of the week. You have him as your under $6,000 play. We're seeing eye to eye there. Mitch, big pick for you here. You have to wrap up and clinch that number 1 season-long ranking here. Who do you have under $6,000?
You guys gave me the free square. I appreciate it. So I'm going with the 34-year-old future Hall of Fame running back, Adrian Peterson.
Love it. Love it.
He's only 5K. He's locked in for 20 touches each week. They're favored against the Giants, and there's no way the Giants are going to go in there and blow out the Redskins. The Redskins aren't going to blow out the Giants, so the game is going to stay competitive. I don't care what the running back's name is. If they get 20 touches at 5K at DraftKings, I'm going to put them in every single lineup.
So what happens to your game plan whenever Daniel Jones lights them up and drops 5 touchdowns?
Adrian Peterson will probably still get 20 touches.
Yeah, I think regardless of game script, he's going to get his. It's going to be an interesting one. This could be one of those sneaky games where we see some, I don't want to say random guys, but some guys that people aren't really talking about pop off, but it will be a fun one to watch, hopefully. For me, I'm going back to the well, and this is a guy that's broken my heart in weeks past. Tyler Boyd, 5,800. The thing that I love about Tyler Boyd, he's getting the targets, even if he hasn't been producing. So like last week, really rough game. It was an easy fade, in my opinion, against the New England Patriots. He still saw 7 targets. And this is basically another open audition for Andy Dalton to show that he can still play in the NFL at a high level. I think it's going to be a big mixing game, but with Andy Dalton looking to throw the ball against the Miami Dolphins in a really solid matchup, I like Tyler Boyd. And I was surprised to see this. It's actually one of the higher over-unders at 46.5 points this week. So if they're able to hit their projected point total, I'd be very surprised to see Tyler Boyd not find the end zone and probably get 7 to 9 targets this week. So what are your thoughts there on Tyler Boyd? I know I've talked about him previously on the show, and there have been weeks that he's disappointed, but hopefully not this one.
I think Boyd's great. I think Peterson's great. To your point, Dan, I'm happy playing the Jags lottery, as you said, because I nailed the wide receiver 1 Chris Conley week. Just saying. He was my dart throw. He finished as wide receiver 12. It's fine. But yeah, no, I love your guys' picks. But it's good stuff.
Of course, you got to drop in your Chris Conley. Chris Conley was a fantastic pick.
That was awesome. Very good. One thing I was going to bring up, the reason why Tyler Boyd isn't going to work is because it's going to be John Ross week. He's back healthy. He's had 2 weeks to get going. This is his 3rd week. The Dolphins give up a ton of passes over 20 yards. John Ross is going to go off.
Give us a projected stat line for Mr. Ross then.
4 catches, 110 yards, and 2 scores.
All right. I'm going to quote you on that.
I was going to say 4. I was going to say 4 for 105 and 2. So that's good stuff.
There we go.
All right, then I might as well throw my Tyler Boyd pick away.
I think Ross makes a good tournament pick. I like Tyler Boyd, JB, but as you guys start crafting a DK lineup this week, unless you take Mitch's Adrian Peterson at 5K, it's kind of tough, believe it or not, to squeeze in Tyler Boyd at 5,800. So we'll see how the Bengals plays pan out.
Yeah, and it could be tough, like you said, your lineup construction. The one thing, and again, I haven't looked at it yet this week, but I would be very surprised, even though he has a juicy matchup against the Dolphins, I'd be surprised to see a lot of people put their faith and trust in Tyler Boyd after a few letdown weeks. But, as the week progresses, we'll be able to look at the projected ownership percentage a little bit more, in a little more depth. So we have our fades, we have our plays. You guys nailed the dart throws. All 3 of you had, who was it? Conley and Ward for Philadelphia last week, and you hit that. My dart throws have been absolute rubbish this year. I honestly don't know. I think I hit one, and it was the one where I picked somebody that was exactly $4,000, but I'm coming with vengeance this week. Yeah, I bent the rules a little bit, but it still didn't help. So Dan, who's your dart throw this week under $4,000 that you like so far?
You've been torturing me with these dart throws. Yes, I did hit last week with Greg Ward in Philly, but I can't begin to tell you how much studying it took to come up with that dart throw. And I don't know if I've even had enough time this week, but I'm hoping here that the juice is back in Mr. Albert Wilson of the Dolphins. As we've been talking a lot about the Bengals in the nice warm Miami weather at 3,800. He had 8 catches for 59 yards versus the Giants, showing his speed again last week. His targets have been up recently, 6, 5. The only one game he had 2, that's because he got concussed. Fitzmagic's looking to him. I just think he's going to end the season hopefully with a big play versus the Bengals, and is a successful dart throw for me as I can't finish last to you guys. So Albert Wilson all the way.
All right, so you threw Albert Wilson there. You mentioned Devontae Parker earlier. What are your guys in general? What are your thoughts on Ryan Fitzpatrick this week? Let's say you're in a 1 quarterback league, because if you're in a super flex or 2 quarterback, you're probably going to play him. But if you're in a 1 quarterback league, Would you trust him this week?
I would trust him over Carson Wentz. I think Fitzmagic is probably a tournament play, like Dan said, as far as John Ross goes. But yeah, I think Fitzmagic could easily. The Bengals are in full Joe Burrow mode at this point, I would say. So I wouldn't be surprised to see 350 and 4 for Fitzmagic. So
okay,
Albert
and then
Wilson is sound. So
right, and obviously Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's not Lamar Jackson, but he still offers a little bit of rushing upside. And at this point in his career, he's just saying screw it, and he dives headfirst every opportunity he gets. Mitch, who do you have? Who's your dart throw under $4,000?
I couldn't find anybody I like. So I just was like, so the Lions absolutely suck on defense. Jameis Winston threw for over 200 yards in the first quarter against them last week.
Over 240 yards. Sorry, over 240.
See, there we go. I mean, they're awful. And so I just went with the cheapest Broncos guy that I liked. And it's Tim Patrick at 3,600. He had 7 targets last week. These under 4K plays this week are rough. So I just went with the Lions suck. So let's pick a Broncos guy.
I actually looked at Tim Patrick as well, and I steered away. But yeah, I don't mind it. And I completely agree. I was looking at this today. It's rubbish out there. It's, again, we look at this leading up to Wednesday when we record the show where, we're not seeing all the injuries play out or who's, not going to play. So obviously there's time to pivot when you look at this stuff Saturday, Sunday morning. But yeah, as of now, it's rough. Jordan, who do you have?
So I remember a couple of weeks ago, I picked this certain guy to be my dart throw, and he came through for me, actually. That was huge. He had a big catch, and he had a 57-yard touchdown. He has Aaron Rodgers throwing to him. It's Allen Lazard against the Vikings at 3,700. The Vikings get beat up through the air. Their front is good. I don't think Aaron Jones is going to have a good day. He may punch it in once or twice, but I think Lazard's going to catch at least 1 or 2 deep bombs, hopefully 1 or 2, maybe more. Rashad Perriman-esque type play out of Lazard would lead to a huge day to Lazard, but I think at 3,700, if he can just connect with a couple of deep balls with Rodgers, his value is already taken care of. So I'm going to stay with him, stay on brand. I've been on and off brand this episode, but I'm going to finish out on brand.
And we've seen what wide receiver 2s have done against them. I'm not saying he's going to have a Marvin Jones type game where Marvin Jones dropped, 3 or 4 touchdowns, but there is an opportunity there. We look at these dart throws. Allen Lazard, he's certainly one that could pop off and have a good game. We talk about guys that have a different situation from previous weeks. And that's kind of what I looked at here. Like Mitch said, I went through every running back, every wide receiver, and we don't pick tight ends for the under $4,000 play. I have a wide receiver here, and he's in a slightly different situation. It's David Moore for Seattle. Josh Gordon suspended. David Moore, $3,300. His snap share dropped significantly once Josh Gordon joined the Seahawks. Now, I don't think he's going to have a ton of opportunities, but just the fact that he's going to be on the field for 40 to 50% of the plays here in Week 16, I like that opportunity against Arizona Cardinals defense that gives up a ton of points. It's going to be a fast-paced game, I would think. Another Chris Carson smash game. Dan, you and I, obviously, the drivers of the Chris Carson train here. And I think this is, if you have Chris Carson in your lineups for week 15 and 16, it potentially a league winner there. But David Moore, Seattle against Arizona, he's my dart throw. Who knows?
Imagine trading Chris Carson after Rashad Penny had his 2-game stretch. And now,
I'm sure people did. I'm sure.
For sure. No, 100%. I'm just saying.
We know people.
Imagine doing that, and then he's going to be the absolute savior for the semifinals and the finals. I love that. That's just poetic.
Yeah, I mean, whether it was a startup or whether it was redraft, Chris Carson, he was a great value. And he's one reason that a lot of my teams in Dynasty have been successful. A great value that's returning running back 1 numbers on many occasions.
Yeah, I mean, as far as 29 acquisitions go, Chris Carson wasn't nearly free in startups, like you said, and Darren Waller was a free agent. There's so many guys. There's actually more league losers this year, I would say. Your Odells, your Jujus, your whomever. But yeah, what a weird year it's been.
It really has. And I think we say that every year, But this year, I absolutely agree. And you talk about league losers, and I don't have any numbers in front of me, so don't quote me on this, but you look at guys that have gone in the first 2 rounds, how many of them just haven't panned out? Or, maybe first 3 rounds in redraft. And then you look at guys taken in the 10th or later that have been really productive. You look at a DJ Shark, or you look at Darren Waller, or, it's just absolutely insane how many, like you said, Jordan, league losers there are this year compared to recent years. I would like to see those numbers. I think it'd be very interesting to see.
I want to look at redraft ADP and see how many of the it's got to be like 66% bust out of the first 2 rounds in redraft. I would say, it was bad.
If you look that up, I want to know. So you're gonna have to tweet that out, or at least let us know. In our
Thursday
chat.
Or Friday when I'm really slow at work, I'll give it a go. But we got the main project flowing right now.
All right, good. Dan,
JB. Well, one last comment, JB, on that under 4K player is David Moore, and that's what I love about this show. I could tell everybody here did some really deep diving and digging on these cheap plays, and you got me thinking on David Moore now. Maybe even over. I know Mitch and I were talking a lot about John Ross. He's 4,200 on DK. But that Seattle Vegas total for the Hawks is now up to 30.25. The Hawks Cards game is the highest scoring slated game on the week now, even passing the Bucks and the Texans. So if you could get David Moore in there, Josh Gordon's gone, Patrick Peterson's going to lock up at some point, either Metcalf or Lockett from time to time. That's a nice sneaky play that could allow you to pay up elsewhere in your lineup.
So, the upside's there. But what I'm expecting is 1 catch, 7 yards. Hell, maybe a fumble. Maybe he'll end negative points. Who knows? All right, guys. I've had a blast. And I know life kind of got in the way in recent weeks and the hiatus, as I mentioned, but this has been an absolute blast to jump on with you 3 guys and record through week 16 here. And the weeks that we didn't record, we at least put out the information and our takes on Twitter. And the one thing that I hate about that is we never give our reasoning, and we're not just blindly picking these guys. It's not, as we do call the under $4,000 guys dart throws. We're not just throwing a dart at a board and seeing what player it lands on. We've spent a lot of time and energy, and again, it's been an absolute blast to record with you guys. And every week we've done closing thoughts to wrap up the show. So now, week 16, to wrap up what has been a crazy 2019 season, what are your closing thoughts? Dan, what do you have here?
Yeah, I agree with you, JB. It's been a blast. You guys have been great. You've definitely helped in my strategy as I go into the weekend. Closing thoughts, happiest and saddest time of the year all at once. I know we're all big dynasty guys, so we don't really ever shut off, other than maybe Christmas and New Year's. But still a lot of football to be played. Some very exciting contests in DraftKings this week. They got some single entry $100, $150 contests that are pretty juicy. NFFC has a nice postseason hold'em contest. It's $200. There's about 250 grand in prizes and 1 in 36 wins. So there's still a lot of football to be played. Even though this is our closing episode for the year, definitely keep following us on Twitter, as we'll be giving a lot more good advice as we keep competing in these final weeks. So thanks, gents. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. Jordan, what do you got? Closing thoughts, whether it's about the season, what you're doing in the off season, if you want to talk about your heat map for the listeners, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the very beginning, my team's all floundered. That's the kind of tough thing about having your guys. I guess that's the one thing I kind of want to, I don't want to, sway you against it. But, I got a bunch of teams with, Lockett and Nick Chubb. And, unfortunately, a lot of my teams lost in the semifinals. So a lot of the times, Dynasty doesn't come down to having the best team on paper. It's just you got to have the right guys when it comes to the weeks. Every year, it comes down to week 14, week 15, those guys that you can just plug and play. Rashad Perriman last week.
Yep.
It's crazy stuff. But like I said, it was a lot of fun, man. I'm excited to see how the final standings are going to shake out. I've had fun playing against you guys in DK. I look forward to joining a dynasty with you guys finally. But yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed our conversations. You guys are very insightful and awesome. So yeah.
One, I can't believe we're not in a dynasty league together yet, but that's going to change very quickly. And
Keyword yet.
Right. Exactly. It's coming. But you mentioned a lot of the teams that you have the same guys. And if they don't hit in week 14, 15, 16, it's tough to win championships and progress in the playoffs. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but that's one reason that I had a really good season, and I had a lot of my dynasty teams make the playoffs, but it's because of guys like Chris Carson and Mark Ingram and Josh Allen, who obviously had that really great 5-6 week stretch. But if you have high ownership percentages and those guys don't pan out, especially come playoff time, it really is tough to have the end result that you're looking at. But on the flip side, if when they hit, it's that much better. So it's always interesting. Last year, I really tried to avoid having the same players from roster to roster. But this year, going into the season, I said, these are the guys that I want on my teams. I'm planting my flag. And if it works out, because I put the time in, great. And it so happens it did. But, we talk about guys like Chris Carson all the time. Those are the guys that help you get to the playoffs, and as your season progresses, hopefully make a championship game. Mitch, most likely the champion here for the 2019 Start Sit Series. What do you have for our listeners?
I'll just make it short and sweet. I just want to thank, Jordan and Dan again for coming on and being available every single week to come on. It's been really awesome. And, I appreciate everyone reaching out after these episodes on Twitter too and asking us more questions, because we're always available. All four of us will keep being available. If you guys have questions on anything from redraft, dynasty, whatever you need, just reach out to us and we'll be there.
Yeah, you talk about, people engaging us on Twitter, and I will be the first to admit, and you guys laugh at me and you know it, I can get a little pissy at times, and it's something that I need to work on, but I love the engagement, and I love, even if we miss, and God knows we miss, everybody does, but the process is there. Sometimes the results aren't, but it's something that even throughout the off season, I'm going to start gearing up here a little bit. I know I've disappeared over the last few weeks, especially on social media, but it never stops for us. Dan, you mentioned it. We're dynasty guys. I know, Dan, you do a lot of the redraft and the daily as well. But for me, this off season, I am so excited. Yes, I'm sad for the season to end, but the off season, oh my goodness, I'm absolutely thrilled. Again, Dan, Jordan, Mitch, thank you guys for joining me throughout this entire season. It's been an absolute blast. We hope that all of our listeners enjoyed this series and this season, and hopefully it helped you out along the way. Find us on Twitter at Superflexology. Best of luck if you're there in your championship games in Week 16, and have a great night.